What if you could pause time in the middle of a battle? Sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, right? Well, that's exactly what we see in today's reading. Let's dive in. Hey everyone, and welcome to the Unadorned Bible, the channel where we're reading chronologically through the Bible in 1 year. I am so glad that you've joined us. Today is a fun day. Today is day 84, and we are reading Joshua chapter 10 through chapter 12. As always, we read from the New Revised Standard Version Updated Edition. With that being said, let's jump right in. Chapter 10. When King Adonizedek of Jerusalem heard how Joshua had taken Ai and had utterly destroyed it, doing to Ai and its king as he had done to Jericho and its king, and how the inhabitants of Gibeon had made peace with Israel and were among them, he became greatly frightened, because Gibeon was a large city, like one of the royal cities, and was larger than Ai, and all its men were warriors. So King Adonizedek of Jerusalem sent a message to King Hoham of Hebron, to King Piram of Jarmuth, to King Japha of Lachish, and to King Debir of Eglon, saying, "Come up and help me, and let us attack Gibeon, for it has made peace with Joshua and with the Israelites." Then the 5 kings of the Amorites, king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Jarmuth, the king of Lachish, and the king of Eglon, gathered their forces and went up with all their armies and camped against Gibeon and made war against it. And the Gibeonites sent to Joshua at the camp in Gilgal, saying, "Do not abandon your servants. Come up to us quickly and save us and help us, for all the kings of the Amorites who live in the hill country are gathered against us." So Joshua went up to Gilgal, he and all the fighting force with him, all the mighty warriors. The Lord said to Joshua, "Do not fear them, for I have handed them over to you. Not one of them shall stand before you." So Joshua came up to them suddenly, having marched up all night from Gilgal. And the Lord threw them into a panic before Israel, who inflicted a crushing blow on them at Gibeon, chased them by the way of the ascent of Beth Horon, and struck them down as far as Azekah and Mekkedah. As they fled before Israel, while they were going down the slope of Beth Horon, the Lord threw down huge stones from heaven on them as far as Azekah, and they died. There were more who died because of the hailstones than the Israelites killed with the sword. On the day when the Lord gave the Amorites over to the Israelites, Joshua spoke to the Lord. And he said in the sight of Israel, "Sun, stand still at Gibeon, and moon in the valley of Ajalon." And the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, until the nation took vengeance on their enemies. Is this not written in the book of Jashar? The sun stopped in mid-heaven and did not hurry to set for about a whole day. There has been no day like it before or since, when the Lord heeded a human voice, for the Lord fought for Israel. Then Joshua returned, and all Israel with him, to the camp at Gilgal. Meanwhile, these 5 kings fled and hid themselves in the cave at Mekkedah. And it was told Joshua, "The 5 kings have been found hidden in the cave at Mekkedah." Joshua said, "Roll large stones against the mouth of the cave, and set men by it to guard them. But do not stay there yourselves. Pursue your enemies and attack them from the rear. Do not let them enter their towns, for the Lord your God has given them into your hand." When Joshua and the Israelites had finished inflicting a great blow on them, until they were wiped out, and when the survivors had entered into the fortified towns, all the people returned safe to Joshua in the camp at Mekkedah. No one dared to speak against any of the Israelites. Then Joshua said, "Open the mouth of the cave and bring those 5 kings out to me from the cave." They did so and brought the 5 kings out to him from the cave, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Jarmuth, the king of Lachish, and the king of Eglon. When they brought the kings out to Joshua, Joshua summoned all the Israelites and said to the chiefs of the warriors who had gone with him, "Come near, put your feet on the necks of these kings." Then they came near and put their feet on their necks. And Joshua said to them, "Do not be afraid or dismayed. Be strong and courageous, for thus the Lord will do to all the enemies against whom you fight." Afterward Joshua struck them down and put them to death, and he hung them on 5 trees. And they hung on the trees until evening. At sunset Joshua commanded, and they took them down from the trees and threw them into the cave where they had hid themselves. They set large stones against the mouth of the cave that remain to this very day. Joshua took Mekkedah on that day and struck it and its king with the edge of the sword. He utterly destroyed every person in it. He left no one remaining. And he did to the king of Mekkedah as he had done to the king of Jericho. Then Joshua passed on from Mekkedah and all Israel with him to Libnah and fought against Libnah. The Lord gave it also and its king into the hand of Israel, and he struck it with the edge of the sword, and every person in it. He left no one remaining in it. He did to its king as he had done to the king of Jericho. Next Joshua passed from Libnah, and all Israel with him, to Lachish, and laid siege to it and assaulted it. The Lord gave Lachish into the hand of Israel, and he took it on the 2nd day and struck it with the edge of the sword, and every person in it, as he had done to Libnah. Then King Horam of Gezer came up to help Lachish, and Joshua struck him and his people, leaving no survivors. From Lachish Joshua passed on with all Israel to Eglon, and they laid siege to it and assaulted it. And they took it that day and struck it with the edge of the sword, and every person in it he utterly destroyed that day, as he had done to Lachish. Then Joshua went up with all Israel from Eglon to Hebron. They assaulted it and took it and struck it with the edge of the sword, and its king and its towns and every person in it. He left no one remaining, just as he had done to Eglon, and utterly destroyed it with every person in it. Then Joshua with all Israel turned back to Debir and assaulted it, and he took it with its king and all its towns. They struck them with the edge of the sword and utterly destroyed every person in it. He left no one remaining, just as he had done to Hebron, and as he had done to Libnah and its king, so he did to Debir and its king. So Joshua defeated the whole land, the hill country and the Negev, and the lowland and the slopes and all their kings. He left no one remaining, but utterly destroyed all that breathed, as the Lord God of Israel had commanded. And Joshua defeated them from Kadesh Barnea to Gaza, and all the country of Goshen, as far as Gibeon. Joshua took all these kings and their land at one time, because the Lord God of Israel fought for Israel. Then Joshua returned, and all Israel with him, to the camp at Gilgal. Chapter 11. When King Jabin of Hazor heard of this, he sent to King Jobab of Madon, to the king of Shimron, to the king of Ashaph, and to the kings who were in the northern hill country, and in the Arabah south of Kinnereth, and in the lowland, and in Naphath-dor on the west, to the Canaanites in the east and the west, the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, and the Jebusites in the hill country, and the Hivites under Hermon in the land of Mizpah. They came out with all their troops, a great army in number like the sand of the seashore, with very many horses and chariots. All these kings joined their forces and came and camped together at the waters of Merom to fight with Israel. And the Lord said to Joshua, "Do not be afraid of them, for tomorrow at this time I will hand over all of them, slain, to you Israel. You shall hamstring their horses and burn their chariots with fire." So Joshua came suddenly upon them with all his fighting force by the waters of Merom, and fell upon them. And the Lord handed them over to Israel, who attacked them and chased them as far as Great Sidon, and Misrath-Maim, and eastward as far as the valley of Mizpah. They struck them down until they had left no one remaining, and Joshua did to them as the Lord commanded him. He hamstrung their horses and burned their chariots with fire. Joshua turned back at that time and took Hazor, and struck its king down with the sword. Before that time Hazor was the head of all those kingdoms, and they put to the sword all who were in it, utterly destroying them. There was no one left who breathed, and he burned Hazor with fire. And all the towns of those kings and all their kings Joshua took and struck them with the edge of the sword, utterly destroying them, as Moses the servant of the Lord had commanded. But Israel burned none of the towns that stood on mounds except Hazor, which Joshua did burn. All the spoil of these towns and the livestock the Israelites plundered for themselves, but all the people they struck down with the edge of the sword until they had destroyed them, and they did not leave any who breathed. As the Lord had commanded his servant Moses, so Moses commanded Joshua, and so Joshua did. He left nothing undone of all that the Lord had commanded Moses. So Joshua took all that land, the hill country, and all the Negev, and all the land of Goshen, and the lowland, and the Arabah, and the hill country of Israel, and its lowland, from Mount Halak, which rises toward Seir, as far as Baal-Gad, in the valley of Lebanon, below Mount Hermon. He took all their kings, struck them down, and put them to death. Joshua made war a long time with all those kings. There was not a town that made peace with the Israelites except the Hivites, the inhabitants of Gibeon. All were taken in battle. For it was the Lord's doing to harden their hearts, so that they would come against Israel in battle, in order that they might be utterly destroyed, and might receive no mercy, but be exterminated, just as the Lord God had commanded Moses. At that time Joshua came and wiped out the Anakim from the hill country, from Hebron, from Debir, from Anab, and from all the hill country of Judah, and from the hill country of Israel. Joshua utterly destroyed them with their towns. None of the Anakim was left in the land of the Israelites. Some remained only in Gaza, in Gath, and in Ashdod. So Joshua took the whole land, according to all that the Lord had spoken to Moses. And Joshua gave it for an inheritance to Israel, according to their tribal allotments. And the land had rest from war. Chapter 12. Now these are the kings of the land whom the Israelites defeated, whose land they occupied beyond the Jordan toward the east, from the Wadi Arnon to Mount Hermon, with all the Arabah eastward. King Sihon of the Amorites, who lived at Heshbon and ruled from Aror, which is on the edge of the Wadi Arnon, and from the middle of the valley as far as the Wadi Jabbok, the boundary of the Ammonites, that is, half of Gilead. and the Arabah to the sea of Kinnereth eastward, and in the direction of Beth Jeshimoth, to the sea of the Arabah, the Dead Sea, southward to the foot of the slopes of Pisgah. And King Og of Bashan, one of the last of the Rephaim, who lived in Asheroth and Edrei, and ruled over Mount Hermon and Salach, and all Bashan to the boundary of the Geshurites and the Machakites, and over half of Gilead to the boundary of King Sihon of Heshbon. Moses, the servant of the Lord, and the Israelites defeated them, and Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave their land for a possession to the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. The following are the kings of the land whom Joshua and the Israelites defeated on the west side of the Jordan, from Baal-Gad in the valley of Lebanon to Mount Halak, which rises towards Seir. And Joshua gave their land to the tribes of Israel as a possession according to their allotments, in the hill country, in the lowland, in the Arabah, in the slopes, in the wilderness, and in the Negev, the land of the Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. The king of Jericho, 1. The king of Ai, which is next to Bethel, 1. The king of Jerusalem, 1. The king of Hebron, 1. The king of Jarmuth, 1. The king of Lachish, 1. The king of Eglon, 1. The king of Gezer, 1. The king of Debir, 1. The king of Geder, 1. The king of Hormah, 1. The king of Ared, 1. The king of Libnah, 1. The king of Adullam, 1. The king of Mekkedah, 1. The king of Bethel, 1. The king of Tappuah, 1. The king of Hepher, 1. The king of Aphek, 1. The king of Lasharon, 1. The king of Madon, 1. The king of Hazor, 1. The king of Shimron-Meron, 1. The king of Ashaphath, 1. The king of Tanakh, 1. The king of Megiddo, 1. The king of Kadesh, 1. The king of Jokin in Carmel, 1. The king of Dor in Naphdor, 1. The king of Goim in Galilee, 1. The king of Tirzah, 1. 31 kings in all. This ends the reading for today. So, the sun actually stopped moving, and there's a lot of debate around what exactly that was. But what we know is that God fights for the ones he loves. Time is not an obstacle for God. So what battles are you facing right now? Drop a comment below. And if you're enjoying this journey, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel because you don't want to miss what happens next. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Take care.